007 First Light has officially sold 2.7 million copies in its first week? Someone is lying. And I don't even think that's hard to prove, or at least very easy to create a lot of doubt about this statement, its validity. So first of all, we have the post, 2.5 million copies sold in the first week. And that post was made on June the 6th. Your support means the world to us, and we can't thank you enough for being part of the journey. Get now, blah blah blah, and here you can the link to buy the game. And it's very interesting. At the same time, literally also in June 6th, the CEO of IO Interactive, the same company that made James Bond First Light, by the way, said that they have sold now 3 million copies. So you're telling me this game that sold 1.5 million copies in the first 24 hours of launch, then proceeded to sell 2.7 million copies in the first week, now has officially, by the words of the CEO, somehow sold 300,000 more copies in less than a day? I'm sorry, but something here just doesn't really add up. Am I the only one who's thinking like that? Because it just doesn't seem real for some reason. So I have already mentioned this, but all of these posts seem a lot sus. If you look at the first initial post of the 1.5 million copies sold, it was done on May 28. May 28 is the third day after the game was released. Which is very strange and very interesting. Why the hell would you wait literally 2 days? Well, 1.5 days, I should say, probably, to be fair, because, you know, the release was on Tuesday, and it implies a bunch of things. So, why would you wait effectively what is almost 2 days? Because this was done at 9 p.m., by the way. So they were waiting really hard to see if they can break the 2 million copies sold. But it didn't. They waited 2 days, almost, 2 days, 2 days plus, 2 days plus is more legit than 1.5. They effectively waited 2 days to announce that they sold 1.5 million copies. That's very interesting. Why wouldn't you instantaneously announce it the first day if this happened? Because the 1.5 million copies sold probably did happen in the first day. So I think when this happened, I think that they were just waiting to see if they can push the number to 2 million copies sold in the first 2 days, which would sound a little bit better than 1.5 million. You know, it's a decent number for the first day sales, better than a lot of other Vogue Slob games. By the way, we're not even going to have the discussion about this game being Rogue. It is. That's the end of the story. If you want to pretend that every woman beating you up and doing blah, 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 and there being one hot woman that you kind of can almost, not almost, but you can sleep with, that makes it non-Vogue, I mean, I'm sorry, but you're norming out hard here, my boy. But in any case, they did this. And now the coup de grace is the fact that they announced 2.7 million copies sold in the first week. But when we look at this graph, okay, let's do some first grade counting. 1, 2, 3, 4, Dracula from Family Guy. 5, 6, 7. 7 was June the 1st. 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, and now it's 13. Why the hell are they announcing 2.7 million copies sold in the first week when it's effectively the end of the second week? Why would you do this? How does this make sense? Starfield, remember how Starfield announced, like, day 1, 15 million players or something? Remember how they had announced end of the week, like, 20 or 25 or something million? You don't wait. You don't wait a week or 2 weeks after this happens, okay? By the way, if they say 2.5 million copies sold, I actually kind of do believe this to a certain degree, because it did stand for a very long time. It did stand for a week, and it did have this. So, you know, if it sold I said 2 million copies, it's gonna sell easy. 3 million copies, probably doable. And at this point, it does look like it's gonna get 3 million copies. Maybe even 4 million copies in a month and a half. Because needless to say, the sales have collapsed, okay? If they sold this much, if they sold 3 million copies, which is unbelievable, in the first week, now the players have dropped double, which means the sales are not gonna actually just impact by gonna be impacted by half. No, it usually doesn't work like that. It's kind of a geometrical thing, because there's a lot of people who keep playing. There's a lot of people who play like only 1 or 2 hours a day. So now that they're finishing it, so it's not like the sales are gonna continue but on 50% less. No, this is not exactly how these things happen. Okay. So the sales are going to go down. Again, the numbers don't make sense. 24 hours, 1.5 million copies, and then in a week, 2.5? Okay, that's already kind of a collapse. So, you know what that effectively means, by the way? That it's not like, if we do the math, if we do actual data analyst type shit, or business analysis type shit for sales in this situation, make no mistake, by the way, we're not talking about this goes down by 50%, which means the sales go down by 50%. That means that in the next week it can sell 1.5 million copies. No. Because we need to account for day one sales being super massive, aka 1.5, which means, you know, 2.7 minus 1.5 or 1.2. Half of that. So if they're lucky, by best estimates, maybe this week they have sold 600,000 copies. If lucky, and that's doubtable, because when the sales go down, the sales typically go down hard. Okay, after the first day, after the first week, after the first month, they are very noticeable, just breakings, and the going down is pretty goddamn hard. Okay. Also, people are currently doing the Stellar Blade failed to hit 3 million copies sold in its first 15 months. Was it a flop? And this is how stupid these people are. A lot of people are currently talking about are comparing First Light to things like Stellar Blade. No, Stellar Blade wasn't a flop, because Stellar Blade didn't cost 250 million to make. At this point, I was previously nice, and I'm not gonna do it now. The previous time we talked about how many sales this First Light need to be successful, I said 4 to 4 million. The reality is, if you look in a little bit deeper, it's probably more than that. That's the absolute minimum break-even point, probably. Because not only are we looking at the Steam 30% fee, we're also looking at a lot of these people were real celebrities. Not just YouTubers, but like Hollywood celebrities that in a lot of cases actually just ask for royalties based on sales, which is very possible. And if that has happened, it's not like it's, you know, a lot more, but that still means more. And they have a lot of celebrities here. Okay? And that 250 million probably does not account for marketing. It doesn't account for a lot of things, in fact. So, the reality is, as pretty much any AAA game out there, chances are that First Light needs most likely close to your 5 to 6 million copies to start making a real profit. Okay? Now, I do think this could be less for that. Again, I think 5 million is definitely break even for First Light, but there's also a chance that it does need now those 6 million sales. And especially if you consider how well Hitman fucking 2 sold here. Again, look at this absolute peak. 361,000 peak. That's a lot. That's a big peak, okay? That's something, you know. You don't make a new game and expect to hit you know, what is this? Wait, how many did it sell? What was the peak? 71. Okay, you don't expect to hit a 5 times lower peak. You probably don't expect to hit a peak this big, but you probably don't expect to hit something 5 times lower than it at the same time, which is abysmal. Also, if this was a success, once again, as I point out the previous time, then Amazon would not have taken it off IO Interactive and taken it over. Amazon Games is where things go to fucking die. And everyone knows it. So Amazon is just now going to use this to bleed money because they can bleed money and they are willing to bleed money. That's why they are taking this off of IO Interactive. Because whatever their internal metrics are, they're bad. Because if this thing was making money, they would actually still let IO Interactive keep it. But no. At this point, no matter what happens, Amazon Game Studios is taking over. And that is not a good thing. Also, when you look at Twitter, what's happening with this, there's not a lot of people talking about it, okay? There's not. There's pretty much honestly no one talking about it at this point. So, if the game's really successful, there's not a lot of people talking about it. The numbers don't make sense, and it's not looking good, okay? Granted, this is probably the closest we have seen a modern Vogue slop game come to success, and it's gonna break even, which is, I think, a record? Dragon Age Railguard not even close to breaking even. A Ghost of Yote shit show. Borderlands 4, I think, did it. Yeah, Borderlands 4, I said it in the first couple of days with the peak that they're definitely breaking even. But they don't have a future after that because if you have a look at that game, it's in the gutter. In any case, thanks for watching. Have a nice day. Bye-bye.